please hit that subscribe button. Hey everybody, better suited to win the Stanley Cup this season. If you are new to the channel, Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins.
Locked on and he scored! And we're live.
Hey everybody, so welcome back to another episode of Hockey 101, and today I want to talk about match penalties. Now, last episode we talked about high sticking. This episode we're going to talk about another type of penalty, and one that you don't see a whole lot in the NHL, but it does happen, and it's something that's important to know, especially if you are new to the game or just learning hockey or not really sure about all of the rules. This is a great one to be aware of and to know. It doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, it's a major happening around the league. Everyone will be talking about it. And it usually leads to a suspension coming after it, and that is match penalties, which I'm not going to read word for word what it is. I'm going to try and just bullet point the important parts here, but it is in the NHL rulebook, which you can easily find. Just Google NHL rulebook. A PDF version comes right up, and you can read it verbatim, word for word, what the rulebook says if you would like to. It is Rule 21 in the NHL rulebook. And you guys, if you want to read the exact rule, can check that out. But what I'm going to do is try to just dumb it down a little bit. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Both of those things really help out a lot and are much appreciated. But Rule 21, match penalty, what is it? Basically, a match penalty shall be imposed on any player who deliberately attempts to injure or who deliberately injures, so it doesn't have to go through with it. It's basically intent to injure an opponent in any manner. So it doesn't matter what it is. If you try to injure your opponent in any manner, it's a match penalty. Or you could attempt. You don't have to be successful. You could attempt to injure your opponent in any manner. That is a match penalty. And basically what happens when you get a match penalty is you're just automatically ejected from the game, and you are very likely going to be suspended afterwards. I can't think of many times where a match penalty was called and it did not lead to supplemental discipline afterwards. It pretty much always leads to a suspension afterwards. But that's not something that gets handled on the ice. That gets handled by the league afterwards. As far as on the ice goes, you are ejected from the game. It counts as 10 penalty minutes against you, not a 5 and a 10, which it's a little bit different than a major and a game misconduct. It's not a game misconduct. It's a little bit different. It's just an automatic ejection. Major penalties do not come with an automatic ejection. Oftentimes, there's a game misconduct added on top of a major penalty, and you get a 5-minute major and a game misconduct, and that results in 15 penalty minutes against the player. A match penalty is only 10 because it's just 10 minutes immediately ejected from the game. And basically what happens to the rest of the team is another substitute player has to go in and serve the penalty, and you are shorthanded for 5 minutes the same way that you would be as if a major penalty was called. So the other team gets a 5-minute power play, unlimited amount of goals they can score, and it's very much like a major penalty in that aspect. But for the player, the big difference is you're automatically ejected from the game for a match penalty. And basically what it is any sort of attempt to injure the opponent where it's deliberate and you are clearly trying to hurt somebody. They can be handed out for pretty much any type of penalty, especially the physical ones, charging, elbowing, boarding, kneeing, hit to the head, spearing, slashing, high sticking, all of those types of physical penalties that, have varying degrees of how bad they are, could result in a match penalty if they are a deliberate, clear attempt to hurt an opponent. And we see this a lot with checks to the head. Any sort of hit to the head could potentially, if it's, pretty deliberate, be a match penalty. When Ryan Reeves, when he got kicked out in the Western Conference Final this past year, I forget what game it was. No, it wasn't. It was at the end of the Vancouver series. It was the last game of the Vancouver series before he missed the game one or the first couple games. or the first game of the Western Conference Final, because of what happened in the last game of the Vancouver series. He got a match penalty for a hit to the head on Tyler Mott, I believe it was. So that's a match penalty, and it led to a suspension afterwards. But it really doesn't matter what the infraction is. Match penalties are pretty clear across the board, that they can be for almost anything that's a clear, deliberate attempt to injure an opponent. So for a match penalty to be called, you might be asking, what's the difference between then someone getting a major for boarding and a match penalty? For a match penalty to be called, it has to be really, really bad. Most of the time, officials are not going to go right to match penalty. If it's if it's a big hit or if it's from behind, they'll just give you a major in a game, or if it sometimes you get minor penalties for those things as well. But if it's bad, you probably will get a major. Match penalties are not often used because obviously that's a big call and that's a big penalty, and the league is going to be looking at it closely afterwards. You don't see them that often, but when they do happen, they're usually very warranted. And it often involves things like stick swinging incidents, things where guys are, going out of their way to, jump at their opponent to lay a hit to the head. That would often be a match penalty. Think of Steve Downey on Dean McCammond. Back when that happened, headshots weren't as big of a deal as they are now. If that were to happen now, that would be clearly a match penalty and very much subject to a long suspension, like 20 games or so. Like that, if that were to happen now, you would be done for a long time. In big major incidents like that, Todd Bertuzzi on Steve Moore, that is a match penalty. That is when you are very clearly, deliberately trying to injure an opponent. Sucker punches oftentimes will get you a match penalty. There's a big difference between two willing combatants dropping the gloves and accepting to fight each other, and that's just a normal 5-minute fighting major. There's a big difference between that and straight up jumping somebody or just straight up sucker punching somebody. And that will often get you a match penalty. If you just come up from behind and clock someone on the jaw, you're getting a match penalty, and you're going to be immediately ejected from the game, and you're going to be suspended as well. So that basically, it's tough to explain without using like actual examples. But basically what you should know is that a match penalty is only called in cases of clear and deliberate trying to injure an opponent, like deliberately trying to injure an opponent or succeeding in injuring them. And it has to be really, really bad. It has to be like a clear cut, completely outside of the normal game of hockey where you're going out of your way to hurt somebody. And that will often result in a match penalty. And the penalty is 10 minutes to the play. Well, it's an automatic ejection. The player is given 10 penalty minutes on the stat sheet because they have to put a number on it. It's an automatic ejection. The other team gets a 5-minute power play the same way they would for a major penalty. And you are, out for the rest of the game. And most of the time, anyone who gets a match penalty is going to end up being suspended by the league afterwards because it has to be that egregiously bad for a match penalty to be given in the first place. So that's pretty much what you need to know about match penalties. I hope this was informative and helped explain it a little bit and give you a better idea of what match penalties are. We don't see them very often. It's kind of a rare call in the NHL, but they do happen. There's always a few of them every year. I wouldn't say it's a heavily called penalty, but there's a few every year for sure. And it's just something that any hockey fan who's watching the game should know about. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, our donation link, merch store, and Patreon are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.